and welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Our guest today is Poker Hall of Famer, one of the voices of the World Poker Tour, and the man called the Ambassador of Poker, Mike Sexton. We'll be talking to Mike about his brand new book, Life's a Gamble. Before we talk to Mike Sexton, there was some surprising news in the gaming world. Cantor Gaming Technology was fined $1.5 million, and the CEO resigned for some gambling irregularities. Richard, what do you know about this?
Well, I don't know other than what was in the paper. The thing that really bothered me about this, two things. One, they knew that it was going on for a long period of time and did nothing about it. And the other thing that really bothers me is $1.5 million is hardly a slap on the wrist. I mean, it's nothing. So I always laugh when people say things like, "Oh, a casino would never cheat because they might lose their license." The thought of a casino actually losing their license is ridiculous. So, they might get fined $1.5 million. Anyway, the good thing is they are contacting. I had a friend who sent me the article recently, and they had contacted him, and they owed him $12,000 that he didn't realize. He said he was embarrassed that he hadn't kept better track of his action, that they owed him $12,000 he didn't realize they owed him. So at least they are doing that.
Well, if they can. A lot of this was underpaying parlay cards. And they're supposed to underpay them by $700,000, so they're required to put a trust fund of $25,000 to pay off anybody who can prove they were shortchanged. So most people who don't keep their old parlay cards or don't have their name on them or something, it'd be hard to prove this.
Well, in my friend's case, he was betting the parlays on the app, and this is the same friend that, Cantor had advertised that they would take action from everybody, that they weren't afraid of sharp money and all of that. I was sitting with him at lunch one day, and he said, "Watch this." He opened his app. He picked 4 teams randomly and tried to make a $5 parlay.
That's pretty big.
Bet denied.
Bet denied.
So I'm glad he's getting his $12,000.
Part of this that boggled my mind was the CEO, Leah Modis, who's been charged with overseeing this shortchanging players by almost $1 million, gets to keep his job for 5 weeks after the agreement. In any industry out there, if you get accused or basically convicted here of cheating, you are shown to the door right away, either by security or by the cops. Here, he says, well, we think you did bad, so in 5 weeks you got to leave this job. That was kind of interesting.
Severe punishment. Mike, do you have anything to say about this case?
Well, it wouldn't apply to me because I could never win a parlay. I can't pick one winner in a game, so it would have never affected me one way or the other. But I really don't know anything other than that to comment about him because I really don't know the facts of the situation. But
all right.
I know it's tough to beat him, and if you beat him, you should get paid. I do know that.
You're here.
All right. We received an email addressed to gamblingwithanedge@gmail.com from a Deuces Wild player. Seems he wants to use variance as his friend. In round numbers, you get 4 deuces about once every 5,000 hands. Depending on the pay schedules, it can be under that or over that, but about once every 5,000 hands. The letter postulates that he's gone 15,000 hands without deuces. That's 3 cycles. About 1 chance in 100 of that happening. And since they're due, he's going to switch to loose deuces, where quad deuces pay 2.5 times as much as regular deuces, or maybe triple deuces, where they pay 3 times as much. He wants to know what we think of his plan to take advantage of variance. Personally, I think the plan sucks. You have a 1 in 5,000 chance of hitting deuces on your next hand, whether you've had 5 sets of deuces in the last hour or you've played 50,000 hands since the last time you hit. There's absolutely no video poker scorekeeper in the sky deciding to give royals or deuces to the people who are under-royaled or underdeuced. So if you think that way, get over it.
Yeah, you're never going to become a winning player if you think that that's the way to riches. So.
All right. Let's talk to our guest. Mike Sexton, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
I appreciate it, Bob and Richard. Glad to be on the show.
All right. Life's a Gamble has been available in hardcover for less than a month now. Why don't you take 10 minutes or so telling us what it's all about, and then Richard and I will have some questions to ask you.
Well, Life's a Gamble is a book that I put together over a cumulative 40 years of stories and incidences and gambling events that took place. And it's not a how-to poker book, but there's a lot of life lessons in the book. But basically, it's about my life story, about 20% of the book, and then it also has the story of the reason for the poker explosion that happened after the turn of the century, and that was basically online poker. And I was involved, of course, with Party Poker that grew to be the number one online site in the world, as well as the World Poker Tour, which actually changed the poker world forever. That was the first show that put poker on television on a weekly basis, and the success of that show and the power of it just catapulted poker into a new dimension that will never go back to what we used to see. Before the World Poker Tour came around, you couldn't find a no-limit hold'em game in any casino in the country. And now, basically, that's all you find in most poker rooms. So definitely, it was the World Poker Tour that was the primary cause of the poker explosion. I was proud to be a part of that. This book tells the story of how it all came about, how the WPT was formed and founded, and where it's gone to. And so that's an exciting part, and also tells stories about the first 30 years of the World Series of Poker and different stories that took place during those events that today's players may not know about, and it's fun to read about those. And then there's many gambling stories in there, mostly on the golf course, but also some other gambling stories. And then I feature 5 chapters on literally icons and legends in the poker world, including Chip Reese, Doyle Brunson, Stu Ungar, Puggy Pearson, Billy Baxter. I mean, the true legends of the high-stakes gambling world. And those are fun stories to read about those characters and some of the things they did. So basically, it's just a very fun, entertaining read. And anybody that enjoys poker, golf, or any kind of gambling stories or action stories, I believe will thoroughly enjoy Life's a Gamble.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I particularly like the stories about the guys, the individuals. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about was you became really quite a close friend of Stu Ungar's. Now, how did that come about? Because you don't, on the surface, you don't seem like two guys who would have ended up as buddies.
Well, it came about because when I came out to Las Vegas in the 70s, I stayed with Chip Reese and Danny Robinson at their house. They were the hot shots in town at that time in poker and made millions of dollars already in the early 70s. And I grew up with Danny Robinson. He's the one who taught me how to play poker and like my best friend. So I stayed at their house, their bachelor pad, which was lavish, I might add. But so because of my connection with those guys, I got to hang around the high-stakes poker players and the high-stakes gamblers at that time. Well, Stu Ungar came out to Las Vegas in the 70s, not to play poker, to play gin rummy with the poker players and anybody else that would play him. And believe me, back in those days, every high-stakes poker player, every one of them were phenomenal gin rummy players. Billy Baxter, Chip Reese, Danny Robinson, Puggy Pearson, Doyle Brunson, Amarillo Slim, Tommy Fisher. I mean, you can go right down the line, and Sarge Ferris. There were so many really, really good gin players, and Stewie played them and just mowed them down like they were grass. And he would spot them. He'd let them look at the bottom card on the deck, the bottom 2 cards on the deck. He'd put them on in all 3 games in Hollywood gin, for example. And finally, they just waved the flag. They wouldn't play him anymore because he was just too good. So at that time in the late 70s, he started taking up poker and automatically jumped in the biggest poker games in town. And then we all know the story. In 1980, he entered the main event of the World Series for the first time and won it. 1981, he entered it again, defended his title. So the first 2 times he ever played the main event, he won it. I mean, his raw talent is second to none. I truly believe that he's the Bobby Fischer of cards.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I was here during that time. He also took up backgammon around that time, which is how I got to know him a little bit. But, yeah, I agree. I mean, he was a savant. It's really too bad what happened to him.
In the good old days, there appears to have been more cheating at poker than there is today. In your opinion, how did the poker world manage to clean itself up?
Well, it cleaned itself up pretty simple here in Las Vegas. When I came out in the 70s and all, the casinos didn't run poker rooms back in those days. Individuals leased them, like Johnny Moss leased the big room at the Dunes at that time, and then Chip took it over and at the Stardust, another guy was renting it. And so the rooms were rented out, and they just paid rent to have a poker room. And basically, because the casinos weren't involved, they turned an eye, and a lot of things went on in some of those rooms back in the day. Nowadays, the casinos run the poker rooms, and obviously it's only to their best intent and intentions to keep the cleanest room possible, because it would not only damage their poker room reputation, but their casino reputation if anything was going on that was sort of uneasy or unethical. So basically the biggest difference, in my opinion, was that casinos took over running the poker rooms and cleaned them up.
Yeah, wasn't Spilatro running one of the rooms?
He probably did run one. If he wasn't running it, he had a piece of it. I can assure you that. So
I bet he had a piece of several of them.
Yeah.
Now, golf, wonderful gambling game. You have lots of golf stories. Now, when Billy Baxter was a guest on our show, he shared stories of matches involving Tony Spilatro, Jimmy Chagra, Doyle, Puggy Pearson, several others. Were you in town during that era?
I was just getting in town almost at the end of that era, honestly, that they were playing with Jimmy Chagra, who's the big drug dealer, of course, and Spilatro, and the hotel casino managers played in the poker games at that time, and you know, the guys that owned the casinos. So the games were just the greatest of all time ever. Yeah, Major Riddle and the guy that owned the Dunes. But anyway, in the golf, the action was just unbelievable high-stakes action back in those days at golf. And it always has been among the poker players, in fact. The high-stakes gamblers and poker players, you know, guys that can't shoot 100 on the golf course bet $50,000 a hole. Stu Ungar did it back in the day when he first started taking up golf. Phil Ivey did it when he started taking up golf. It's amazing that guys that really play good golf, they're wowed that anybody that can't shoot 100 could bet this kind of money on the golf course. But it happens all the time because, as you said, golf is the greatest gambling game that there is, because you can equalize the handicaps in so many different ways. You can spot yards off the tee. You can give a guy an extra putt a hole. You can let him scramble his ball. You can let him play with 3 clubs instead of a whole bag. You can give him strokes. There's so many ways that you can equalize a golf game, you know, where I could play, you know, Jordan Spieth or Rory McIlroy next week if they gave me enough spot, where it'd be an even match. And that's the beauty of golf. And when I first came out here, you know, it really was high stakes action on the golf course, and I got to see a fair amount of it.
I heard that when Stewie first started to play, one of the spots they would give him is once a hole he'd get to throw the ball as opposed to hit it.
Yeah, he tried that one day. They let him do that for a while, but he always had the spot of putting the ball on a golf tee. And he'd even carry a 4-foot tee in his bag, so when he hit it in the water, he could get the ball and put it on the tee where it'd come out of the water where he could hit it. So, you know, he was so bad when he got in sand traps, he put it on a tee, so he never had to blast out of the traps. But he lost so much money at golf and was so bad they just let him do whatever he wanted to do, honestly, because, you know, it was easy money for him.
All right.
I also want to say, when I first moved to town, which was late 70s, I met Puggy in the backgammon club, and that week he had just won $200,000 playing golf, I think with Jay Sarno, and a week later he was broke playing 10-20 7-card stud. So the amount of swings that these guys would take from one week to the next was just amazing.
Yeah, it was very big. And Puggy, when he first started playing golf, he wasn't very good, but he made up his mind to get as good as everybody, and he hit balls every day at the country club, and he got to be a very, very good golfer, about a scratch golfer at one time. So Puggy Pearson could really play. In fact, Doyle Brunson swears he's the greatest pressure putter of all time, including any pro that you'll ever come across. So Puggy had a short game that was second to none.
He's noted for not always playing by the rules.
Well, Puggy did have a reputation of taking advantage of things, shall we say, on the golf course. It's funny how many times that if he would hit first and be the first one off the tee, that when you got over the hill, his ball was never in the rough, never had a bad lie, was never behind a tree. And in fact, Doyle Brunson implemented a rule one time. They called it the Puggy rule in the gambling circles here around Las Vegas. And the Puggy rule is very simple. And Doyle said any time that Puggy ever got out in front of him on a hole, he automatically lost the hole. So because Puggy would pay a guy, the cart boy, $100 to get him the fastest cart in the shed. So, you know, he always rode by himself, and he'd have the honors most of the time, so he'd tee off, and then he'd blaze out over the hill just to make sure he didn't have a bad lie or something happened. But Doyle and the gamblers were pretty wise to that, so they implemented the Puggy rule.
Actually, I have to tell one Puggy story.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just a story I heard. I wasn't there. But he hit it off into the woods one time, and there was just no way for him to get... He would have to hit it over the trees to get to the green. So the only logical thing to do would be to hit it back out onto the fairway and then up to the green. And he went trooping into the woods with his caddy, and they hear this big whack, and the ball sails over the trees and right onto the green. And they get into an argument, that this was not possible, that he must have thrown the ball. But nobody was there, and they asked his caddy, and his caddy said, no, he made the shot, right? So on the way back to the clubhouse at the end, the caddy for the other guy was walking with them, and he said, Mr. Pearson, tell the truth. You had your caddy throw that ball. And Puggy goes, you think I'd trust my caddy to make that throw?
Yeah, there's a lot of good Puggy stories in my book, because I do a whole chapter on him. And, Puggy was always good to me, but, he did like to take advantage of the situation, shall we say, if it came up.
Yeah.
How would you rank the best old-time players, Chip Reese, Stewie Ungar, Doyle Brunson, whoever else you wanted to put on that list, in their prime, with the current hotshots, many of whom learned the game multi-tabling on the internet and could play as many games in a month as the old-timers did in 5 years?
Yeah, well, I think if you talk to any high-stakes player that were around in the 70s and 80s, to a man, they would say Chip Reese was the best all-around poker player. And he was a fantastic player. And I asked him one time, I said, Chip, what separates you from these other guys that you play with every day, for these high stakes? He said, Mike, I'll be honest with you. He said, when those guys are on their A game, they play as good as I do. He said, the difference is they have a C and D game. They steam and go off when they shouldn't, whereas I don't. So, that was one advantage he had over him. When it comes to no-limit hold'em, I believe Stu Ungar is the greatest no-limit hold'em player that's ever lived. And Doyle, he swears that in the 60s and 70s, in the heyday of poker in Las Vegas, that nobody compared to Puggy Pearson. He thought Puggy Pearson was by far the best poker player back in those days.
Oh, really? Not Johnny Moss?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Puggy Pearson.
A little more than a year ago, you called out the World Series of Poker for making us wait 4 months for the November 9 at the main event, and also what you called devaluing the value of the WSOP bracelets by having so many events all over the world. Ty Stewart, the commissioner of the WSOP, said, paraphrasing quite a bit, thank you for your comments. Why don't you go run the WPT and let us run the WSOP? Now, is there any lingering controversy here?
No, and actually I've never even heard that quote from Ty, but he could have very well said it. But he and I are very good friends, just like I'm good friends with everybody at the World Series of Poker. From the tournament director Jack Effel to Nolan Dalla to everybody at the World Series. I don't think there's been a guy, not too many guys anyway, that have praised and sung the praises of the World Series over the past 30 years more than me. And I haven't missed a World Series since 1984. So, I'm a big fan of the World Series. I so admire what they do in terms of putting on that three-ring circus at the Rio that they do every year with all those players, with the different tournaments, the three-ring circus, and to staff that event, to process people in, to register, to cash them out. I mean, it's such a job, people can't even imagine how big it is. And they've got it down to a science now, and I salute them for it. Doesn't mean I agree with them on everything. I didn't agree with them on the November 9. I still think it's bad for poker. I'm against it, and I'm against it. I weigh the positives and negatives. I'm a guy that thinks anything that's going to be good for poker, I'm for. The first couple years, I didn't have a problem with it because at that time, the online sites were still here, and players could get patched up and make an extra $100,000 by wearing a patch at the main event in November. Those days don't exist anymore. And I think there's no reason to extend it for 4 months now. I think.
Wait, explain that. What was the patch?
The patch was where you wear somebody's brand. Like the PGA Tour golfers wear. When they get logos on their jerseys. Well, back then
they can't do that anymore.
Well, they can, but they don't make anywhere near the money like they used to.
I
It
see.
just doesn't exist anymore because there's not online poker in the United States anymore. So they don't pay those exorbitant fees that they used to back in the day for people to wear their patches. So that doesn't exist anymore. But I think for them to hold your money for 4 months, now I know they pay out ninth place money, meaning a guy gets $1 million, but still there's a big difference between $1 million, $4 million, $8 million, and if you won $4 million, you might move to a different neighborhood with your family and change your life more so, and you could do it before the school year started type of thing. But my biggest concern is I just can't stand the thought that if there was a weak player that made the final table, that he's now got 4 months to train with top pro teachers and become a much better player before the final table takes place. I don't think that's fair to the guys that are already there at the final table, and I'm against that. I'm also against it because I know one day somebody is going to die from July to November. Just suppose Doyle Brunson played the main event and died in September. Now it would be such a morbid scene at that final table, and whoever dies would tarnish and dampen the final table. No matter who won, somebody would always be saying, well, you wouldn't have won if so-and-so had still been alive, kind of thing. So it's a very bad thing. It's going to happen sometime. Another thing, suppose you lived in Finland and you had one big blind or two big blinds left in your stack, and now you got to fly halfway around the world again to be blinded off in the very first hand you play, most likely. So that just doesn't seem fair to me for people to have to travel from Australia or Finland or around the world to finish a tournament. So I think the negatives outweigh the positives, in my mind anyway, and that's why I'm against it. So, but I love the World Series. I'm just against that one idea. I was the guy this year, they took a lot of heat for moving the starting times of tournaments from noon to 11 a.m. in the morning this year, and the evening tournaments, they moved from 5 p.m. to 3 p.m. Well, poker players generally like to sleep in, so a lot of the pros were bitching about it and moaning and writing tweets and Twitter, and, these guys are idiots, what are they doing, lame brains. But I'm one guy that stood on the chest and pounded the chest saying this is the smartest thing and the best thing that's happened to the World Series in 10 years. And I believe that. It was a great thing for the World Series of Poker, especially old guys like me, because you're up early anyway. And if you play a late tournament, now you get to bed 2 hours earlier instead of 3:30 in the morning. You get to bed at 1:30. So I was all for it, and I love that move that they made. So, I sing their praises when I think they do the right thing. But, the November 9 is just an issue we differ on.
I don't understand the reasoning behind it either. I don't understand why November.
Well, the reason is very simple. Because they start televising the main event on every Tuesday night. They'll start now probably next week or 2 weeks. And because they televise it week after week after week, the idea is to lead all those televised events up to the live final in November.
I see.
So it's all about the television, honestly, and that's their purpose for it. That's their reason for it. They think it brings in more ratings. The truth is, if they took 2 days off from when the 9 guys made the final table, you could fly in your family members, etc., they'd have the same amount of crowd there, the same enthusiasm. The television ratings would be the same. At least in my mind, I think it would be. But, maybe it's an ESPN decision, and jointly as well as theirs. I really don't know the inside info about it, but I know it's about television. That's why we have the November 9.
I also agree with you on the bracelets. I think to have the same bracelet for Europe, Australia, everywhere, they could make it something else for that, rings or something,
No,
but
I understand it. I understand the brilliance of marketing the bracelet like they have. I mean, in truth, as poker players for years and years, it was all about the money. Who won the most money? But now a guy could win 3 tournaments there for a total of $700,000. It happened a few years back. Jeff Losandro did that, and then one guy could finish 6th in the main event, maybe get $3 million, or win a $1,500 one tournament, and he get $1.5 million. But everybody sings the praises of the guy that won the 3 bracelets. It's not about the most money now. It's about who wins the most bracelets. And they've marketed that that's the best poker players in the world, the guys that have got the bracelets. It's ingenious. We see guys come out here and chase the bracelets, and I salute them. It's a great, great marketing tool. And the truth is, poker players do want to win the bracelets.
Well, how often do you wear yours?
And I don't wear it. If I make a final table once in a while, I'll get it out and put it on. But, I thought I should have got a second one for when I won the WSOP Tournament of Champions in 2006. I got $1 million for it, so I didn't really complain about not getting a bracelet.
Now, speaking of the World Series, last week we found out who's going to be in this year's November 9, which actually begins in October because U.S. elections. Who do you think is going to win?
Well, I think the chip leader is going to win, Cliff Josephy. I'm a big fan of his. I know what a nice guy is. He's been in our final tables on the World Poker Tour a couple times, and Johnny Backs, they call him. But I know a number of poker players he's helped out and staked in their careers as they were coming along. So because of all the good things he does and how nice a guy he is, I'll be pulling for him.
This is a complete shift in subject here, but one of the things that I really appreciated about your book was the fact that you often talked about being between bankrolls, which, is another way of saying getting broke. And I'm just, because so many of these guys, they want you to think that they just win all the time, and obviously that doesn't happen. So what did you do when you were between bankrolls?
I was very fortunate in my career because I was such good friends with the high-stakes poker players and guys that had money that I could always borrow money or always get staked if I got broke. In fact, that's probably why I bet so much on sports in my life, because it didn't matter if I got broke. I knew I could be in action the next day. Now, if I didn't have those connections like Puggy Pearson and Chip Reese and some of the guys I could borrow money from whenever I wanted to, $5,000, $10,000 to get back in action, I'd have had a different outlook maybe on betting sports and doing this kind of stuff because, if you get broke and have nowhere to go to when you're out in this town, you're dead meat, and you do have to go get a job or something. And that never happened to me because I was always fortunate. I could always get in action. It was never an issue for me how much money I owed or whatnot, and I could always win playing poker. So, that was never an issue for me, honestly. But that between bankroll line I love. I actually stole it from Frank Henderson. He was the runner-up to Johnny Chan in 1988 in the World Series in the main, or 1987 in the main event of the World Series, and that was the line he used. When he's broke, he'd always say he's between bankrolls, and I loved it, and I still use it.
Yeah, I've been between bankrolls once, and I actually back in around 1980, I actually had to go out and get a job. It was awful.
Yeah, no, it would be awful, and honestly, because I had that crutch that I could always borrow, I could always get in action, I could always win playing poker, that I could get staked, that it was never an issue for me, and I'm not sure that's a plus now looking back on it. I think it's a negative because maybe that's why I bet sports so much, because I knew if I got broke it didn't matter, I could play anyway. So I always took a stab at betting sports on the weekend, and I should have listened to your show 25 years ago if you had it, because I needed an edge and I never took it. I bet the whole sheet and I stayed busted for 25 years.
Now, before Munchkin so rudely took us off with the World Series of Poker questions, I was going to ask you about Lon McCarron and Norman Chad. They host the World Series of Poker telecast, while you and Vince Van Patten do the same for the World Poker Tour. In your opinion, how do the broadcasts, how are they similar and how are they different?
Yeah, pretty amazing. You look back on it. Vince and I have been with the World Poker Tour since day one. We're now going into our 15th season. Those guys, I believe, have been together 14 years, might be 13. I think it's 14. I think they started a year after we did, and they're still together. And it's pretty amazing. And I think Lon is as professional a broadcaster as you'll find in any sport, anywhere, anytime. He's terrific, and I'm a big fan of Norman Chad. We're good friends because I think he's really funny.
He is.
The difference is Vince and I, when Steve Lipscomb founded the World Poker Tour, he was looking for poker guys to do the broadcasting. Vince and I both started playing poker when we were 13 years old. And so he got poker guys and transitioned them into poker broadcasting, where those guys came from like other sports and things, and they got transitioned over to poker. And they're doing such a great job. They've been there all this time. So,
Vince did have an acting background.
Yes. No, he was a child actor and an actor and, former pro tennis player for 10 years. And but he had broadcasting experience, which was a blessing for me, because I can remember clearly our first broadcast from the Bellagio. The first show we ever did, I was so scared. I was just chugging beers down before the show started, because I was so nervous. That
sounds like a good idea.
Well, I'd never been in a high school play, so being put on television now for the first time, I was very nervous about it. And Vince helped calm me down, and he was an anchor there. So even though I love Norman,
Lon
and Norman, I wouldn't trade Vince for anybody.
But they're both good professional broadcasts as far as you're concerned.
Oh, absolutely, sure.
We had a question, gamblingwithanedge.com, regarding the World Poker Tour. Where do you see it going in the future?
Well, what's happened over the past couple years as the WPT has gone global big time. And because of that, I can see us continuing to go global in terms of putting more events. I know the president and his assistant are leaving today, I believe it is, to head down to South America to set up some WPT events down there. And obviously a company in China, Our Game, bought the bought the WPT a little over a year ago now. And they have, 500 million users, I think 40 million active users on their site. It's a free game site. And I know that the WPT is looking to get into the social media and the free games a little bit more, and that's where their bread and butter is going to be down in the future. But the backbone of the company is always going to be the televised poker events that we do now.
Are they going to have more games on the World Poker Tour site?
They're going to have more games, a lot more games, and different kinds of games. You know, like you see kids play these games. You know, it's different characters and all kinds of different things. They're just developing software now for this, and it's fascinating stuff. They showed us a bit of it just about a month ago of what's coming up for the World Poker Tour, and it's astonishing what they're doing and fascinating. And you know, they think that's going to be the future, at least of the financial aspect of WPT, and going to be very successful. And of course, Club WPT is the bread and butter of the site now, and they're the ones that pay for all the bills for the World Poker Tour and our events, going to the events, televising the programs. So they've done well with the Club WPT. That's where you pay, a monthly dues of $20 a month, and you get to play all the poker you want to win real cash and prizes and seats in the WPT events. So it's been real good.
Do you get a chance to play much anymore, or are you busy with the show? And
I really don't play that much anymore. We now play. Vince and I weren't allowed to play on the WPT for the first 7 seasons. Steve Lipsman didn't. He thought, if you win it, somebody will think it's fixed or something, so he didn't allow it. But now, when they renewed their contracts, Vince and I used to fly in the day before the final table and fly out the day after. But now, to allow people to renew their contracts on the World Poker Tour, they had 10-year contracts. They now said to provide more of a WPT experience, they're going to bring in the Royal Flush Girls and Vince and I from day one of these tournaments, until the final event. So now, since we go from the beginning, they allow us to play these events. Players love it, and we love it, and it makes better in the broadcast booth, honestly, because now there's a good chance we play for that guy for a couple of days who's been sitting there. So we'll have some inside info, and it'll be a better broadcast because of it. But the casinos love it, the players love it, and we love playing. So now we do get to play at least half the events on the WPT during the season, so it's good. And then I always play the World Series of Poker. I played 11 events this year and only cashed once. Had a losing World Series, but not that bad. But still, it's still fun to play when I get a chance.
Do you get to play any cash games?
I can play some. I have a 7-year-old who's going to be 8 years old next month. So when I'm not traveling with the WPT, I'm spending time with him now. I played as a pro for 25 years. Literally just played poker for a living and played all the time. And then 8-10 years ago, I played a lot of big games in Beverly Hills, cash games on the side, as well as some here in town at Bellagio and now Aria. But I don't really play that many cash games anymore. It's still fun for me when I get a chance to, but honestly, I don't go out there and bang my head playing them anymore that much.
Are you still playing a lot of golf?
I play some golf now, nothing like the old days. When Doyle doesn't play any golf anymore, so once you lose him, a lot of the action dries up, I can tell you. And guys like Phil Ivey and Daniel Negreanu, they've all gotten too good at golf and too smart at betting, so it's hard to match up with them anymore. So, the golf action has dried up, honestly. Now, there's still a much lower level of betting, in golf, where guys will bet, 200, 100, 300 Nassau, something like that, which is still really exciting and fun to play for, and that's what I'm doing nowadays. But it's nothing like the old days where you literally bet thousands and thousands.
Another question from gamblingwithanedge.com. Used to play home games in North Carolina. It's been said that some of those games were pretty weird. What kind of games did you play, and were you the favorite?
Well, we had a rule back in those days: if you could explain it, you can deal it. So literally, I played all kinds of games, wild card games, crisscross, replaying, buy a card, replace a card, all those things that you can think of. But the one game that I went to twice a week in Nashville, North Carolina, I drove 100 miles to play in it twice a week. You had to get there by noon. You couldn't get a seat. It was with tobacco farmers and rich business guys. But the game they played, believe it or not, was 7-card stud, all down, high-low, declare with chips. I mean, declare, the last man that took the last bet had to declare first. So
you declared in order.
Yeah. So it was better get out. In other words, you dealt out 3 cards, okay, then you had a round of betting, then you get another card, a round of betting, but the bet rotated. So you couldn't check. You bet or you folded your hand when it was your turn to bet. And that's the way it was. And amazingly, even though you saw no cards, you could pick up on where guys were by the way they bet, by who positioned himself to declare first, so you might turn a guy around the other way who didn't know which way he was going. But you had to win both ways to win the whole pot. If you got tied one way, you lost the pot. So you could have a wheel.
Declared both.
Yeah, and another guy could have a flush, for example, and you go both ways with the wheel. You lose the pot, because you didn't win both ways. So you have to be careful when you declare both ways. But I'm telling you, that game got more action, and we just played it. We started at 5, 10, 15, and 20 back in those days, and then went at midnight to 10, 20, 30, 40, and it got to be a pretty big game. But it was a fun, action-oriented game that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I haven't seen him played hardly anywhere since, before or since, in fact. But I can tell you, it was the best poker game I ever went to, and I went to it for over 10 years.
There was a story in the book, actually, if you could tell that story, about a golf matchup where I think was it Doyle who kept doubling either call it off or double the stakes?
Yeah, it's my favorite story in the book because I was involved in it pretty heavily. And it took place one year at the World Series of Poker where Doyle was sitting on a table with Howard Lederer and Huck Seed. And they started talking about golf. Now, at that time, Huck and Howard were playing every day at TPC Summerlin, and they were getting to be really pretty good golfers. And I hadn't played in 6 months. Doyle probably hadn't played in almost a year. And a golf match came up where Doyle made a proposition that he and I would play them, and we would tee off on the ladies' tees and scramble our ball, and they would tee off on the blue tees and scramble their ball. So we had about a 80-yard spot on every hole at least, and that was going to be the game. And so Doyle made the bet for a $20,000 Nassau to start with. So on one of the breaks at the World...
How much money does a $20,000 Nassau turn into?
Well, that's $100,000 because there's 5 ways. It's one automatic press aside, so you can win 2 bets on the front, 2 on the back, and 1 overall. So it's 5 bets, but that's just how it started. And the next day, after making the bet, Doyle went in and played with those guys in the cash game, and they were laughing at him for making the bet because they know we hadn't played at all. And Doyle threw his chest out and said, well, if you think you got the nuts, you can just double the bet to $40,000 Nassau. And they said, yes, we'll double it. So now we're playing the match for $200,000 in 1 round of golf. So now Doyle says, maybe we better go out and see what we can shoot. So the next day, he and I went out to TPC Summerlin from the ladies' tee, scrambling our ball, and we're hacking the ball all over the place. We can't play at all. Doyle's moaning all the way around. I can't believe I got us in this trap. I can't believe it. And he was staking me, so really it was him in the trap, And we shot like 77, which is horrible, scrambling your ball from the ladies' tees. And he said, we're going to get crushed. These guys are going to be 600 par, easy. We're going to get killed. And he said, we got to get out of this bet. So he goes in the poker room again the next day. He said, what do you guys want to do with this bet? And I said, what do you mean? We got a bet. He said, no. He said, I went on hit balls. My knee, Doyle was on a crutch at the time. He couldn't hardly walk. He said, my knees hurt me. I don't want to hurt any worse. It's going to be a close match, Let's just not play. No, we made a bet, they said. So now Doyle throws his chest out again. He thought he could bluff at him. He said, well, I'll tell you what you can do. You can double the bet or you can cancel it. And they doubled it again to $400,000.
Oh.
So now we're playing 1 round of golf for $400,000. And now Doyle says we're dead. And
No, is this $400,000 each or $400,000?
No, just for the team.
Oh, okay.
It's a team bet, yeah. So now, he says, now we're dead. And he was really sweating bullets. He said, I can't believe they called my bluff. What are we going to do? I said, Doyle, I was real good friends with a guy named Harold Henning who played on the senior tour. Well, the week of the U.S. Open, there's no senior tour event, so he was off. He lived in Florida. And our match was going to be a week after that. So I said to Doyle, I'll go to Florida and train with Harold Henning for a week, and when I come back, I said, I promise you I'll be able to shoot par myself from the ladies' tee. And, hey, man, that's a good idea. So now I'm him-hawing around because I didn't have any money or nothing, I said, Doyle, I might need a little training money, though, to fly down there and all. I can't even get down there. He reached in his pocket. He pulls out 2 $5,000 chips. He throws them to me. He says, go train. So now.
Good friend to have.
Yeah. Doyle knows how to take care of his men, I can tell you that. So now I fly down to Florida, play every day with Harold. When I come back, I'm not going to be any better. I'm really playing good for me. And now Doyle sends a man out. He still hadn't played, incidentally. He sent a man out who was about a 1 handicap to watch me play 18 holes at TPC to see when I could shoot. And he said, report into my house as soon as the round is over. So the guy watching me, and on every hole said, wow, how are they going to beat this, And I shot about 1 under par or even par on my own ball. He said, how are they going to win? How are they going to win? There's no way they're going to win. So now we get back to Doyle, and Doyle says, okay, how do you do? And the guy said, Doyle, he said, you got the nuts. And Doyle said, we got the nuts, Dewey, we got the nuts. He said, well, if we got the nuts, he said, how much are you betting on us? Now, this guy never bet over $500 on it in his life on anything. He looked at Doyle. He said, I want to bet $5,000 on you guys. And Doyle almost fell out of his chair. He said, you want to bet $5,000 on us? He said, that's good enough for me. So now the next day, Doyle goes back to the poker room and goes through his act again one more time. Now, the match is going to happen like in 3 or 4 days. He says, I tried hitting balls. My knees bother me again, he's moaning, and he says, what do you guys want to do? And I said, Dole, we got a bet. We're playing it next Tuesday. And Dole throws his chest out again. I'll tell you what you can do. You can double the bet or you can cancel it. And they doubled it to $800,000 in one round of golf. And as soon as they said double, Dole said, yes! And he was so happy. The next day, when we went out to play in the middle of July, it was like the hottest day of the summer, had 50 carts, at least 50 carts following us around. All the gamblers in town were out there to watch this match.
To laugh at you or to something.
It was a fascinating. They were all betting on one side or the other of this match. It was a legendary golf match here in Las Vegas, let me tell you. And it was really close. And, we started out, we were 2 up after 3 holes, and Dole was laughing at him. I forgot more about golf than you guys will ever know, and needling them, And on the 4th hole, they had about a 45-foot putt, and we had about a 12-footer for birdie to go 3 up. And Howard didn't putt the ball within 20 feet of the hole, and then Huck gets up there and drains this putt from 40 feet. And I lipped out one side, and Dole lipped out the other side. Now we're 1-1. Instead of being 3 up, the match is even. And we stayed that way all the way through 9. They birdied 10, we birdied 11. Anyway, it was a close match. We bogeyed the 15th hole, which is the easiest hole in the golf course by a mile, when we were 20 feet from the hole. We didn't get up the hill, and it rolled back down at us. Anyway, we get to number 16, and we had about a 40-foot putt for birdie, and they had a 6-footer on a par 5 hole, and our putt broke about 10 feet to the left at least, and I didn't come close to it. And Dole's moaning, now we're going to lose our money. And he putted the ball, and when the ball got halfway to the hole, it still had 20 feet to go with a break in it. He started screaming, it's in, it's in, it's in. And the putt went right in the hole, and the crowd went crazy. It was the most amazing thing that I've ever seen in any Masters tournament, anything. That moment was more electric than all of them. And then we end up winning 17 and 18 to win 2 bets for the day. So we won $320,000 for the day in that match. And Dole was giving me a $15,000 free roll on every bet, so I won $30,000. So I was very happy. It was just a great day. It was my happiest day on the golf course.
It's a great story.
It is.
Yeah.
We're going to take a few minutes for some commercials, and when we get back, Mike's going to tell us about how he got started with party poker. It's a great story. It's in the book, and stick around for it. South Point has more than 10,000 games, returning more than 99%. This is more than anybody else has. Through the end of July, they're having casino-wide progressives. The big progressive starts at 10,000 and must be hit by 25. Every player actively playing when the jackpot goes off receives $25 in free play. A second progressive begins at 1,000 and must be hit by 2,500. This is estimated to be hit 3 times each day. In August, all the promotions at the South Point will be for those who already get mailers. It's an unusual move for them. They decided to further invest in their most loyal customers rather than opening up the promotions to all comers. So, if you get a mailer, you already know what the promotions are. And if you don't get a mailer, it doesn't matter. The new semester of free video poker classes at South Point will begin Wednesday, August 10th, and go through early October. This time they're going to be held in the Silverado Lounge, which is as soon as you enter the casino from the parking garage. At the Palms, from now until July 28th, they have drawings Saturday night, 7:15. 20 winners share $10,000 each night. Every day between Monday through Friday, you swipe your card to get an additional 20 entries. A very similar series of drawings will take place in August on Saturday evenings. Play for prizes Monday through Friday, August 1st to 12th. You earn Best Buy gift cards. From August 15th to 26th, you earn Macy's gift cards. Prizes are redeemed at a rate of 0.2% for video poker players, up to $190 per day. You keep the points. In July and August, every Sunday you earn double points on video poker and 10 times points on reels and video reels. On Wednesdays, 500 video poker points earns you a free car wash. On Thursdays in July, and then switching to Tuesdays in August, the same number of points earns you a free Brendan movie ticket. The last week in August, Monday through Friday, you get mystery multipliers. For video poker, that means either 2x or 3x, limited to 80,000 bonus points per day. Which means if you get a 2x multiplier, you can play 80,000 base points and get them doubled. If you get a 3x multiplier, you can play 40,000 points and get them tripled. At videopoker.com, it's the best place to play lots of games. If you sign up for the gold membership, $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year, this allows you to get corrections on most of the games. Game of the week is 100 Play with Super Times Pay. Super Times Pay is a 6 coins per line game where approximately every 15 hands you get a multiplier between 2x and 10x. The average EV for the game increases by about 0.25% over the base game, and you do not need to learn a new strategy. There will be a higher variance, though, on the game. All right, we're talking to Mike Sexton about his new book, Life is a Gamble. One of the stories in the book was how he got started with party poker, and it's an interesting story, and we're going to ask Mike to relate that to us now.
Well, the story of party poker is fascinating. One of the truly most successful business stories of all time, and that includes Microsoft and everybody else. And, you know, I got involved. I was at a poker tournament in Atlantic City. It was 3 days before Christmas, or about 4 days before Christmas, and I was flying back to Vegas the next day. And I get a phone call, and the guy says, you know, are you involved with an online poker site? And I said, well, no, not officially. And he said, well, good. He said, I've got some people that, you know, are going to start an online poker site. They've got a lot of money, and they're looking for a poker domain expert. I think you'd be perfect. Can I be your agent? He said. And I said, well, yeah, we can talk about that. So now they set up a meeting. 2 days later, I had to meet a lady at Bellagio. Now, this is 2 days before Christmas in the year 2000. Her name was Ruth Parasol. She was 35 years old, a lawyer, really good looking, and very, very smart. And I met her for this interview to see if I could be the poker domain expert for their poker site that they were going to start. So she took all my resume, set it right off to the side. First thing she said was, can you be in India in a week's time? If we hire you, you're going to have to be there for several months. Then you're going to have to go to the Dominican Republic, because that's where our customer support is located, for a few more months, and then stay down when we launch the site, you know, which hopefully will be by no later than September. And I said, well, if you hire me, I said, I was single at the time. I said, yes, I can go. And I said, but what exactly is the job, you know? And she said, well, the job is you're going to be the face of the site. You're going to help the software guys develop the site, and any poker questions regarding anything regarding poker, you know, will go through you. And so I said, okay. So she took all my info, and we ended up striking up a deal where I got a salary and a piece of the site, and you know, and I wanted a $100,000 bonus, cash bonus up front. And she didn't say anything then, but the agent that called me said, look, they're going for everything. They'll give you the bonus later if it does well, but nobody in this business, in the software development business, ever pays money up front. You don't know if the site's going to work. You don't know if you're going to get customers, nothing. So then nobody pays up front money. I said, well, if there's no up front money, there's no deal. And so I held fast with that. She called back. He said, is there really no deal with that? I said, there's no deal. I'm not going. You know. So we negotiated a deal where I agreed that they could pay the $100,000, an extra $10,000 a month for the first 10 months. So then I'd get $25,000 a month instead of $15,000 a month. So I agreed to that. So now, the 2nd of January, this is 10 days later, I'm in India. And they had about 40 people working in this company at the time. Now, I should add, they had been in the online casino business since 1997 with online blackjack, online slots, online bingo.
What was the name of their site? Do you remember?
They had a couple different names back in the day of their poker sites. And, I mean, not poker site, because they didn't have a poker site. They were just looking to develop poker. They heard it might be the newest thing. It was just going to be another arm of their business. They never thought it was going to take the price of slots or blackjack or anything. So anyway, to make a long story short here, I ended up going to work for them, and I met this poker team over there. And when I talked to these people for like 10 minutes, I realized that nobody in this company knew anything about poker. It fascinated me that anybody could start a poker site where nobody in the company knew anything about poker. And I told the software guys, I said, look, I don't know anything about software, computers, nothing. They said, if you tell us what to do, we can do it. And so literally that's how we started. I said, you know, player 1 is on the button, player 2 is in the small blind, player 3 is in the big blind, player 4 has options A, B, and C. Now back then, it was all limit poker that we started with. So I said he can call, he can fold, he can raise. Those are his only options. And we went around the board, and I literally did that with every single game. We started with limit hold'em, then went to 7-card stud, then stud 8 or better, and then Omaha and Omaha High-Low. So we did all the games. I was there about 4 months. I wrote the rules for the site. And then I went down and met the customer support team in the Dominican Republic. I stayed there for a few months, explaining to them what poker players were going to complain about and what the problems would be. And then we launched Party Poker on August 1st of 2001 with a Party Poker Million satellites, one-table satellites. It was $22, where you could qualify to be in the semifinals for this Party Poker Million, where we were going to put a player and a guest of his on a cruise ship, a luxurious cruise, give them an extra $500 in cash, and let them play, pay their cruise expenses, of course, and then allow them to play for a tournament with 100 players. That would be $1 million to first place. And I thought it would bring a lot of players to the site, and it did bring a lot of players to the site. And that's how we launched Party Poker. In less than 4 years' time after Party Poker was launched, they changed the name to Party Gaming. They went public on the London Stock Exchange for $8.5 billion, the largest float in 5 years at the time. As soon as they went public that day, they were automatically bigger than British Airways, bigger than MasterCard, bigger than so many businesses that people had never even heard of. I mean, this Party Gaming site. And yet here it was, that big, amazing success. And, you know, the analysts always called it the Coca-Cola of online poker, was Party Gaming and Party Poker. And it really was. Back in the heyday, people forget how big it was because we left the U.S. in 2006 when they passed the UIGEA law. And because all the owners, there were 4 of them that had made over $1 billion. You know, one of them made $4 billion, a couple billion, and they'd made all this money. And their lawyer said, "Look, we don't think you're doing anything wrong by having an online poker site in the U.S. But if it's deemed that you are, your shareholders can sue you, and you could lose back all that money that you've made." So, us and anybody else that was publicly related companies, you know, and had an online site had to leave the U.S. at that time. Now, PokerStars, Full Tilt, they weren't publicly traded. They stayed in the U.S. And as we know, they got to stay in until 2011. April 15th is when they were shut down in the U.S. But they got an extra 5 years and got all our customers, to tell you the truth. But it was a good ride, and I'm still with Party Poker today, and there's still a consultant for them. And, you know, it's a fantastic company, and we're hoping one day that, you know, online poker comes back to the States, you know, in a big way.
Were you one of the billionaires when it was sold?
I was not, because about 18 months before they went public, I was the last U.S. shareholder, and they came to me and said, you know, would you be interested in selling your shares? And I was pretty broke at the time, you know, and I said,
between bankrolls?
Yeah, between bankrolls.
Any chance?
Very good, very good. And so I said, yeah, I'd be interested in talking about it. And they said, what do you want for them? I said, well, you tell me what you think they're worth.
Sound like a poker player.
And they said, no. I said, you tell. I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll both write down a number on a piece of paper and see how far apart we are. And they agreed to that. So we got out our pieces of paper, and they wrote down the figure $10 million. And I wrote down $15 million. And they said, no, it's way too high, you know. We don't ever know what's going to happen in this business and blah, 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 you know, and we think $10 million is fine. And even though I was broke, I held my ground. I said $15 million, I think, is what it's worth, at least that much, and, you know, that's what I think is fair. So they said, let us go talk about it. And they left the room. And then they came back in, and so they negotiated, and it came back where they agreed to pay me the $15 million, where they gave me $5 million in cash and pay me $2 million a year over the next 5 years. The condition was I had to stay with Party Poker and represent them only. I couldn't go to any other site, and other sites were trying to get me at that time, but I couldn't go to any other site, and if they fired me for any cause, I wouldn't get the money either. So that was the agreement, and I knew it would protect me getting $2 million a year, so I wouldn't blow it all at once anyway. At least I could blow it out over time. But so anyway, that's how it happened, and you know, but because I didn't hold my shares when they went public, you know, it cost me over $500 million, but still, you know, I came out pretty good with it. And even when they went public, they gave me another $15 million just out of a good gesture, because they knew how much I'd lost by not keeping my shares.
Nice
so
of them.
it was very nice. They didn't have to do it. They didn't have to do it. So that was nice. And so, you know, but, you know, I was never really upset, you know, that I lost out on the money because I didn't keep my shares, because I look at it, suppose UIGEA would have been passed, you know, before they went public, for example, while they were trying to go or something. You know, and now if I'd have turned down $15 million where I wouldn't have got nothing, I'd been kicking myself forever, you know, for not taking that money. So I looked at it like you play a hand of poker. You know, you're dealt a 5-7. If the pot's raised and re-raised in front of you, you're going to throw the 5-7 away. Now, if you knew the flop's going to come 4-6-8, where both your opponents will flop a set and you could triple up, then obviously you'd play the hand. But, you know, at the time you make the decision you think is best, and right, and I never qualmed about the decision in selling my shares and basically going from broke to pretty rich.
Well, Mike Matusow had a gentle way of talking. Do you remember his quote?
Oh, well, I know this. The day the company went public, I happened to go in Bellagio. The day they went public, and it was big news everywhere, and Mike Matusow, known as the Mouth, was playing in one of the games on the balcony. And just as I walked up on the balcony, he stood up and screamed over the whole poker room, "What's it feel like to lose $500 million?" And the whole room just cracked up, including me. I mean, it really was pretty funny at the time, you know. So
he was always a sensitive sort.
Yeah.
All right, changing subjects. You taught ballroom dance. Now, I taught country western dance, which is similar in some ways to ballroom dance, but there's some stylistic differences, and I've yet to see a ballroom dancer wear a cowboy hat and boots. Now, I learned early on that if a guy was willing and able to dance well, he basically never had to sleep alone. Was that your experience as well?
Actually, almost every woman I had except my last wife, but all of them that I had or dated before that, I met through all of them through dancing. Every single one of them. And so, yes, all my familiar experiences with women came from the dance floor, no doubt about it.
There you go. Dancing. Big positive EV in the women department.
Yeah, believe me, it really is.
Well, I first started gambling because I thought being a successful gambler would be exciting and would help me get laid all the time. And it just did not work out that way.
No.
But being a dance teacher...
Yeah, telling a woman you're a gambler, that's not the way to her heart.
No. I lost a lot of girlfriends and 3 wives because of my gambling habits, probably. But I never lost any because of dancing, I can tell you that.
All right. So, Richard, we've started a new website a couple weeks ago. How's that going?
Good. So, yeah, you can get the show at gamblingwithanedge.com. We welcome your comments. You can also send them to gamblingwithanedge@gmail.com or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/gamblingwithanedge. You can get the show delivered to you automatically every week. You can sign up for that at iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or at gamblingwithanedge.com. And if you want an archive of every episode we've ever done, you can find that at bobdancer.com.
All right. Thank you very much, Mike Sexton.
Well, I appreciate it. Love being here with you, and hope the listeners go out to Amazon.com or Audible.com to pick up an audio version. I did the audio version, so you can hear my stories from me if you want to go that route. But anybody that likes poker, golf stories, gambling stories, the history of poker is thoroughly going to enjoy Life's a Gamble.
Thank you, Richard. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good day.